Let's move on to this critical race theory nonsense. So, one of the things that's happening over the last couple of weeks is that finally, because I think people like me and people in these circles and people online, it's very similar actually to the story that I just talked about with Joe Biden, because the online people have been exposing critical race theory for its neo-racism, for the systemic racism which it wants to put into the system, for the idea that white people in essence are born guilty and are guilty over the sins of their forefathers, or actually not even for their forefathers, because no one in my family owned slaves, so why would I be guilty of what someone in my family did generations ago? I shouldn't be, and it didn't even happen. So they want you to be guilty by the color of your skin. They have decided, the critical race theorists and the intersectionalists and the wokesters, they've decided that things like being on time and working hard and empirical facts like 2 + 2 = 4, that these are tools of oppression and white supremacy and everything else. Well, one of the things that's happened in the last month is, as this has been more and more exposed by people online, and Chris Rufo specifically, who I'm going to get to in just a moment, then suddenly the meme went out that no, critical race theory doesn't really exist, or it's not really what you're all saying it is, or it's just not really being put into the institutions, and it's just sort of another right-wing conspiracy theory, sort of like Joe Biden has cognitive problems. Well, actually, we are seeing it infect absolutely everything. So Chris Rufo, who you guys know, who is a lawyer, he has done incredible work bringing lawsuits into a bunch of different red states, of course it's red states, to fight critical race theory in schools, in that you wouldn't want children to be taught neo-racism, the same way you wouldn't want children to be taught Nazism, that it's good. You know what I mean? You could teach about Nazis, that's a very different thing. But Chris is doing a great job with this. He sent out this incredible tweet, and he bulleted out. I'm just gonna read you some of it. So, breaking. The nation's largest teachers union has approved a plan to promote critical race theory in all 50 states and in 14,000 local school districts. The argument that critical race theory isn't in K through 12 schools is officially dead. The union has also approved funding for increasing the implementation of CRT in K through 12 curricula and for attacking conservative groups who oppose CRT indoctrination. The teachers union has made critical race theory its #1 priority and want to implement it nationwide. According to a recent YouGov survey, 58% of Americans oppose critical race theory, including 72% of independents who believe teaching it in schools is bad for America. But the teachers union wants to double down and impose this divisive ideology on your children. The NEA represents 3 million public school employees in all 50 states. They have a $350 million annual budget and an army of operatives in 14,000 local communities. So we've got a little more info on this, but before I get to that, the key piece of this is that what we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks is no, it's not really in schools. No, it doesn't really exist. Well, now we know it does. The Gateway pundits got a little bit more. Laws banning the instruction of critical race theory tenets in public schools have passed in more than 20 states, and there is reason to hope that the tide is beginning to turn in the fight for the country's history and principles. Unfortunately, the Zinn Education Project refuses to accept defeat and desires to teach American children that this country was founded upon the dispossession of Native Americans, slavery, structural racism, and oppression, as opposed to the principles of liberty enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now the ZEP is circulating a pledge to teach the truth, which identifies left-wing methods of analysis like critical race theory as the truth, and decrees that the signees, all of whom are educators, refuse to be bullied into compliance with the law. So far, according to the Zinn Education Project, the pledge has been signed by more than 5,000 educators in all 50 states, and many of the signees were more than happy to provide their reasons for signing. So what is happening here, in effect, is that roughly these 20 red states that are now passing these laws to keep systemic racism, new school, pernicious racism of the left out of schools, there are now groups that are actually getting teachers to basically say, we will ignore the law and we will teach the quote-unquote truth regardless. This battle ain't going anywhere. And I saw an interesting back and forth between Chris Rufo and James Lindsay, who I've also had on the show many times, who's I think one of the prime purveyors of the truth when it comes to critical race theory. In essence, James Lindsay was saying that he's not hopeful that, despite the fact that he has now spent the last few years of his life fighting against critical race theory, in many ways more than almost anyone, that he's not very hopeful that this thing is just coming and coming and coming, and it's going to get worse, and we're going to end up in some sort of South Africa situation. Rufo tweeted back and said that he's optimistic, and I responded, and I basically said that I'm a world-weary optimist. That's the way I always describe myself. I would say I'm an optimist because how could I talk about the news, how could I talk about the things I believe in every day if I wasn't an optimist? If I didn't believe that by me communicating these ideas to you guys, that hopefully that gives you some of the tools to take the right ideas to your family and community and everything else, and then build a better world. That would make me an optimist, but I'm not just a blind-eyed optimist, right? I'm not just someone that thinks just because we say nice things or believe the right thing or fight for the truth that magically these things grow. Like, I just don't believe that. So I would say I'm world weary in that regard. I'm a realist. And my argument to them, in effect, was, well, look, as a world weary optimist, I don't think we can stop it, but I think we can actually basically inoculate the new converts, right? Like the new people who are about to be brainwashed. We can do something to save them. But this thing's here. These diversity and inclusion programs that are in so many of the Fortune 500 companies, that are most likely in the companies you work for or the schools that you're sending your kids to or whatever it might be, they're here. Those things are now infected and cannot be saved. I really believe that. Because even if they were to be saved, the damage that would happen in terms of saving them, like how can you have an organization that believes that it's racist and is going to hire based on skin color and gender and all of these things? How can it reverse that? Oh, sorry, we got that wrong. We're actually going to start hiring based on skill and passion and, you know, education and the rest of it. You can't reverse it. So the only thing that we can do is build new things.